today. One about Isaiah speaking about the coming of this new Jerusalem. Sounds a little bit like the Revelation. Maybe John the Divine cribbed from Isaiah, I don't know. And then we have a story of Paul speaking to the church in Thessalonica, saying, don't be idle. You are people of action. And then we get this passage from Luke, and we think, in fact, I was telling the people that came to Bick and Fina that because of this passage, I actually lost a friend on Facebook because he was going on about how terrible and how things were just going wrong, and that means that the Lord is coming, and He is coming now. Never mind the fact that people have been saying this for a few thousand years. And on top of that, we are told in Matthew's Gospel, you don't know the time. In various other places through the Gospel, Jesus says, I'm coming as a thief in the night. Watch out. But the reality is that we live in very scary times. Depending on where you stand politically, I don't know why we worry about what's happening in America, but I guess that's important for us because it does actually impact on our economy as well. But we could have had a liar, a person who is somehow tainted by what happened in a previous administration by the same name, one that actually, for all intents and purposes, is responsible for creating a war, for whatever reason, economic, oil, you name it. And yet, we're going to have a president of a very powerful nation next year who, a racist, misogynist bigot. I can't say it any other way. So, I think the Americans have chosen between the lesser of two weevils. But the reality is that millions of people all over the world, not least of which in our beloved country, find themselves unemployed, underemployed, at a loss for economic power, whatever. Those of us who have houses, we kind of hope that our houses are more expensive, but actually the housing market is pretty flat, despite the fact that some people are being quite optimistic. I'm not sure that our banking system is all that good. However, our rules and our laws protected us when we had the last credit crunch. And as we watch the news, there are wars or near war. And these things continue unrelenting in many countries around the world. Crime lingers as an ever-present danger. Terrorism, global warming, and the critical environmental problems bring in their wake the threat of famine, of flood, and other climatic hardships. We can spend all morning talking about the problems of the world, because the litany of problems facing our world today are actually endless. And they have been endless since the beginning of time. Economic crises and wars have, of course, been a part of our human condition since the beginning of human history. And I want you to cast your minds back to Genesis and the conflict between two brothers, Cain, a nomadic herdsman who refused to accept responsibility for his brother Abel, the tiller of ground. Am I my brother's keeper? What we experience, dear friends, in our present age is nothing new. No matter how vivid, no matter how painful it may be for us in this time, humanity has been through far worse than what we experience in the here and now. Just ask those who remember the war that was supposed to end all wars. Remember the Depression, of the 1930s, or remember the horrors of the Second World War, the Holocaust. Truth is, dear friends, no age, no place on earth is immune from the consequences of both human frailty and human arrogance, as well as the foibles of misguided leadership. It is all part and parcel of our fallen nature. And so throughout salvation history, the scriptures, both Hebrew and Christian, have come to terms with these and similar quandaries. What do we make of the depravities of conflict? What do we make of the depravities of violence among the nations and in our own country? How do we explain the vagaries of illness, of hunger, of betrayal, even death? Are the tribulations that we experience in our world today somehow related? Are they warnings of God's displeasure? And here we have to be careful because we head into this theology of retribution. Or are they heralds of better things to come? Somehow a reward for our good behavior. Again, theology of prosperity. Most importantly, what we should be asking is, where is God in all of this? And if we're asking, where is God in all of this, we should also be asking ourselves, where are we in all of this? The evangelist that wrote Luke's Gospel questions for the evangelist Luke, questions like these converge in his understanding of Christ and the mission of Christ in the world. And the answers to the questions that I've just asked you are, for the evangelist, absolutely critical to the everyday lives of Christians in the here and now. Luke tries, with the benefit of hindsight, some decades after the Lord's death and the Lord's resurrection, seeking to bolster the faith of his contemporaries who were undergoing such terrible persecution. He tells the gospel story in hindsight with compassion and with vigor. Jesus suffered on the cross and thereby, to use the words of St. Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 15, swallowed up the sin and evil of this world into his own death, into his own resurrection. He made possible an end to suffering and death for all time to come. And yet, we're still at war. Some people in the time of Luke, remember it's post, the Luke's Gospel is written after the destruction of the temple, not as the events were happening that he records. Some people of that time, for them, the questions remained the same as those of the bystanders in today's Gospel account. When will this be? What will be the sign that this is about to take place? Has it already taken place? Where is Christ now when we need him most? When will he, at long last, return and fix things for good, return as our eternal King? And always lurking behind these theological questions is the one fundamental question: when will we, God's people, be forever safe from harm? When will we experience this new heaven and this new earth that both Isaiah and John the Divine speak of? Today's gospel story in Luke is profound, perhaps profoundly troubling, I think. It's a profound response to the types of questions that we ask in the midst of difficulty. It seems to the evangelist that the troubles of this world are just signs that things are developing as they should and in accordance with God's eternal plan. If the present age is filled with terror, filled with fear, it is only because the world itself has in some way been knocked off its axis, kind of in a way staggering at the power of Christ's resurrection and Christ's presence in the world. Scary times indeed, eh? Far from losing heart in the face of past and existing adversity, the evangelist in Luke's gospel asserts Christians must come to know that these things, war, earthquake, drought, flood, plague, pestilence, all those horrible things that are happening in the world, will provide, in the words of the evangelist, an opportunity to testify to the deeper truths of the gospel itself. Because everything in the here and now already contains within it the promise of the salvation to come. As much as the Christians of Luke's day might have wished for the Lord's speedy return and an end to their struggles, their trials, they were not to lose heart, nor were they to be led astray. It would have been all too easy for them, faced with persecution, faced with mockery, to turn aside from the way of truth. And we're given this promise, not a hair on your head will perish. Not a hair on your head will perish. By your endurance, you will gain your souls. So it takes endurance. A couple of weeks ago we heard about faith. The righteous live by faith. It takes great faith to see Christ already present in the midst of all the difficulties that our world experiences today. This is where St. Paul warns the church in Thessalonica and us here at Trinity about being idle. What is set before us today is a challenge. We need the reassurance of Christ's nearness. We need the assurance of Christ's imminence in our world. Everyone wants change. Every one of us wants a better future for ourselves. Everyone wants a better future for our children, perhaps for our grandchildren. Some of you have got great-grandchildren. Every one of us, however, has differing views on the problems before us, and we also have different solutions to these problems. It's easy to think that the world has changed significantly in our time, that our current problems and challenges are somehow unprecedented, or that our age has undergone a unique paradigm shift in thinking, in understanding. But the human heart does not change so quickly, and it certainly doesn't change easily. The truth of the gospel, the truth of Christ's promise, remains as alive as it ever was. If we live in scary times, we also live in sacred times, not unlike those of the first century Christians, the first decades of faith. Christ still works for us, and so do we. I want to just share with you something that Canon Angus Patterson, he's the headmaster of St. Mary's DSG down the road. He shared something on Facebook, and he begins by writing, no James, not trumpet, but trumpet, Brexit, EFF, it, are shouting at the world to fix itself. As these perverse happenings have occurred, together with all that is vile going on in the world, what else has been going on? Let me tell you. It's got an exclamation mark, that's why I did that. It has been a dilution of faith, creating God in our own image through prosperity religion, and an elevation of the principle that poverty is deserved and wealth is a result of hard work. It has been a retreat into self-centeredness and greed, individual rights without responsibility, and the appalling claim that populism legitimizes. Canon Patterson says, we need a new economic philosophy which will eliminate greed, dispel idleness, and cast aside poverty. The current situation is not working, he says. We need a philosophy that holds me accountable for my neighbor's well-being and dependent on him for mine. We need a philosophy that speaks directly to God's likeness in us, the sacred in each human being, and the need for sacrificial love which makes us whole. In short, he summarizes, we need Christ to be born in us again so that we can be Christ in the world. There has never been any other solution, and there never will be another solution. So, dear friends, St. Paul, by tradition, St. Luke's mentor in faith and mission, might challenge us as he challenged the church in Thessalonica of the first century. He says, brothers and sisters, do not be weary in doing what is right. Brothers and sisters, here at Trinity, we have our work cut out for us.